Hi, I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. I'm here today with James McQuiggan, security awareness advocate for KnowBe4, the world's first and largest new school security awareness training and simulated phishing platform that helps you manage the ongoing problem of social engineering. To learn more about our sponsor, KnowBe4, visit KnowBe4.com. James, welcome. Great to have you with us again.
Great. Glad to be here. Thanks, Steve.
So James, time flies. The last time you were on with us, it was 2020, and I remember it because at that time, something heartbreaking and catastrophic happened. German authorities said that a misdirected ransomware attack caused the failure of IT systems at a major hospital in Dusseldorf, and a woman who needed urgent admission was redirected to another hospital. Unfortunately, she died on the way. And I remember thinking how tragic that was, but at the same time, maybe this is going to, raise awareness and, somehow, some way things start to get better. And here we are 2 years later, and it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, certainly not. It was unfortunate that happened. The sad thing is we've continued to still see and hear about stories where healthcare facilities have been impacted by ransomware, and either operations have been delayed or people have suffered additionally. We had the issue in Alabama where a baby died. Now, with a lot of these, there are extenuating circumstances. There's some nuances to each of these different attacks in the sense of, how the hospital responded. Did they respond quickly enough? Did they shut down the emergency room? But healthcare facilities are still very much targeted by cyber criminals that are out there. Even when we look at our own phish-prone percentage, when we look at the healthcare industry, the numbers there are really high without any type of training. You've got people that can click on a phishing link, one in almost every two people within that organization. You start doing some training in some of those phishing assessments, then it comes down and you get down to about one in every 20 people. So it gets a lot better, but even still, it's an easy opportunity. And cyber criminals know that healthcare organizations are slow to get their systems up to date, and so they're constantly being targeted, and we're always seeing them in the news. Yeah, I remember seeing an article yesterday with a healthcare facility out of Colorado had a data breach and thousands of records. So yeah, unfortunately, they're continuing to be attacked, and until that whole industry can shift and get a stronger security culture along with the health culture, it's going to be a while.
So we have some more concerns to discuss, but before we go there, a little bit of good news. I hope this is good news, James. I hope that the money's being spent in the right areas. The security awareness training market over a decade is going to grow about 10x, and we're in the middle of that right now. So we're seeing a lot of spending. So that's a good news. The effort is there. But I'm wondering, is the money being spent in the right areas? You work with a lot of large enterprises, mid-market companies. You work with smaller companies. Are you seeing improvement? Are you seeing more programs and more companies doing more of the right thing? I hope.
Yeah, with all the different data breaches that are constantly in the news. I mean, last year, Colonial Pipeline with their ransomware attack. We had, even in Florida, you had the attack on the water treatment facility. A lot more making news. And unfortunately, with the situation going on in Ukraine with the cyber war and all that, a lot of organizations are realizing that, hey, the majority of these attacks are coming through some type of social engineering through our users. And so looking at finally getting some more education for them. Now, the interesting thing is when we look at the cost of spending, I'm hoping that that's being done proactively and not reactively. But overall, we are seeing more organizations taking security awareness, bringing it into the organization, getting users educated and making sure they're aware of the different types of attacks that cyber criminals like to use, and hopefully start with that increase in more organizations and spending on security awareness, that we can start to turn the tide a little bit on the phishing attacks, because the phishing attacks haven't stopped. They're still coming and they're increasing, especially through the end of last year.
So you mentioned reactive versus proactive. Just like training in a lot of other areas, employees will tune out cybersecurity training after some period of time and revert to their old habits. We see that way too often. One report from Musnik found that, 4 months after cybersecurity training, that was kind of it. Like whatever they might have absorbed, they lost. I don't want to be redundant because we've talked about this so much yet. I think it's really important. You just touched on it again. Are companies getting more proactive? How important is ongoing training? I don't think we can, share that enough. And you're starting to see more of that.
It's interesting because when I do presentations to organizations, one of the things I always talk about is habits. I look at it from a hygiene standpoint and a cyber hygiene standpoint where, every day we might wash our hair. We certainly wash our hands, brush our teeth. These are things we've had to learn over the years, when we were as children. And unfortunately, with regards to everything and relating to all things cyber, it's been things we've learned. A lot of us have been later on in life. And just like every New Year's Eve, the ball gets ready to drop and we go, I'm going to exercise more and I'm going to eat better, and by the end of January, we're sitting back on the couch eating chicken wings, watching football. It's hard to change our habits and it takes work. Good friend, and I know he's been on the show, Perry Carpenter, he made a quote one time that I've stuck with that, you can't expect to go to the gym once a quarter or once every 6 months and then get angry that you're not in shape. It's something that you have to work at. And like habits, it has to be worked on a regular and frequent basis. Whether, you can't just eat one healthy meal a week. It's something you've got to do regularly and you have to work at it. And so those habits have to be changed. And as we start looking at organizations wanting to improve those habits, you start looking at the culture of that organization. And we're seeing in some of the studies that a lot of folks are kind of in that mid-tier. They've got the security awareness program there for training. They're going through and starting doing those assessments. And we're seeing a lot of folks in that area doing those assessments, knowing that they've got to assess their employees to make sure they're not clicking on links or opening up in attachments. It's making sure that frequency is there and continues to happen, so that you can keep reducing your risk overall, because you're never going to get rid of risk completely, but you certainly want to manage it a lot better than having one in every 3 of your users in an organization clicking a link, getting it to something 1 in every 20, 25, or 30 people.
It's amazing. I was reading something from Gartner the other day, and here's the quote from them, James. Human error continues to be a factor in many breaches. And that's a simple statement, but I kind of find it shocking when you think about how much time has gone on where KnowBe4 and other leaders in the industry, thought leaders, are continuously driving this same point home. And here we are. Most of the breaches are still due to human error. I mean, is that getting any better, any light at the end of the tunnel, or not really?
I not to be the pessimist, but I'm seeing, and the cynic in me is saying it's not getting better, but more and more organizations are waking up and realizing, okay, we've got to get the security awareness in here. But that's only the first part. And I've been talking, and within KnowBe4, we've been talking now more about getting that security culture. It's only part of the way that you're getting there with awareness. The awareness, you bring it to their awareness and their understanding. But if they don't feel there's a sense of ownership, they don't feel that they're contributing or a part of it, then they're not going to care as much. And I know I've got to hover over and check the link, or I've got to make sure I've got strong passwords, but I'm in a rush. I don't have time. Forget it. I'm just going to do it and just get it done. And it's got to be something that security becomes top of mind. People aren't looking at it as a behavior change or awareness. They're looking at it as they are able to help secure the organization, protect the organization. Because anybody that's got an email address within that organization has the proverbial key to the front door. And by clicking on that link and or opening attachments, you're letting the cyber criminals in, whether you realize it or not. And so we look at wanting to get more and increasing that culture overall, so that people are taking security and keeping it at top of mind.
Now, to qualify the statement I made about Gartner, they attributed that, by the way, to ineffective security awareness training programs. So companies are spending money. They're actively engaged and will tell you, we have a security awareness training program, and it's not working. So where does it leave those companies? And do you think, speaking of awareness, that enough CISOs are actually aware of that just because they have a program in place, it may not be working?
Right. And, like any program that you're going to have set up, you're going to have metrics. You're going to have some sort of return of investment. And within your security awareness, that's just one part. It's not something like you read a magazine, you're done, and you move on. It's something that you have to work on. It's a year-long project that continues on and on and on. Until you've got a strong security culture where people are always checking the links and being aware of, having strong passwords, being aware of what websites they go visit. There has to be that increased awareness with regards to it. You've got to be doing your phishing assessments more frequently. You've got to have engaging content and not just doing training once a year, but have other little micro learning capabilities throughout the year so that they're constantly being reminded. And usually within your security awareness training program, you want to run it like a marketing campaign. And if you can get marketing or communications involved, that's going to help drive the program, because if you get their buy-in, you've already got your executives to buy in. But if you get marketing and communications, which their job is all about promoting and talking to people, if you get their buy-in and helping push it within the organization and doing it as a campaign, which is what they love to do, that's going to help push the program out to everybody, and then have those constant reminders, have that up-to-date information coming out, keeping everybody aware and that security top of mind. That's going to make your program successful, rather than just trying to put out training and hope everybody doesn't click on any more links.
So I read your blog. It's written by Stu, your CEO, but other people do chime in as well. I've read you. I've read Roger Grimes and Perry Carpenter. You have a great lineup of people there. And one of the topics you often speak to are threats is the business email compromise. And KnowBe4 has been pushing out, some great information. I'm wondering how many people are listening to that advice and acting on it, and specifically in the C-suite, because the risk would be C-suite executives and anybody who's communicating with them and has access to financial controls and systems, not just CFOs, but the people working underneath them. How are companies doing with the business email compromise threat? A loaded question, because we're tracking it. And unfortunately, I regret to inform that it's continuing to trend up.
Yeah. The cyber criminals are evolving their game with it as well. It used to be, you would focus on, a W-2 scam calling up HR, or it would be an invoice scam. And those things are still happening. What we're seeing now, and I think 25% of it last year alone, all came with gift card scams. And they come in and they'll do the impersonation of a upper management person in the organization, CEO, CFO, or senior manager, vice presidents. And they'll be looking for people within the organization that have just started at the organization, maybe there a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And they're doing it using social media through LinkedIn or whatever other social media platforms where people post, hey, got a new job. And they target them and they'll send them an email pretending to be from that upper management person, because as human nature, that hierarchy of status, when somebody from an upper level comes and asks you a question, a lot of us will answer it. And they'll start off the email with something very simple where it's like, hey, are you in the office today? And if they get someone to reply, they essentially have baited the hook. They've got them on the hook and a captive audience. And then they start the communication where they'll make it so they're not available by phone, it's only by email, and then they want them to go buy gift cards to give to some clients. And so what we started seeing organizations do is literally put it in their policies and say, we will never ask you to go buy gift cards. You'll never get an email from somebody that is directed to you from a CFO unless you report to them. They're not going to contact you out of the blue. If you feel they have contacted you and it is legitimate, organizations have made it so that there are channels that they can go through and verify if it's really that person contacting them. In some organizations where it's like an open floor, they can just walk right up to the CFO and go, hey, did you mean to email me about these gift cards? We've even seen it within KnowBe4 in our early days where those kind of scams were going on. So it's important for organizations, especially in that onboarding, have policies to make folks aware within the organization that these things are happening, and we're not going to ask you for any of these actions to be fulfilled.
Do you think one of the problems, James, is that companies listen to this, they read about it, that, intellectually they understand it, but it hasn't happened to them, and until it actually happens to them, they're not really going to take it seriously enough?
Yeah, a lot of the times, that's kind of I'm aware, but doesn't mean I care. They're managing their risk and looking at the likelihood. Okay, this happened to them because they did this. We're going to go through and move forward with the way we're going to run our program. We have cyber insurance. Sometimes they fall back on that, thinking, okay, that'll help us out. We got $1 million insurance or multi-million-dollar insurance policy. If we get hit, then we'll deal with it then. But the unfortunate thing is, and we've seen this where an organization gets hit and then they have to spend millions more in having expenses or overcosts, expenses with regards to more technology or resources after the fact, or what insurance doesn't really cover. Whether they pay the ransom or not, they end up having to spend a lot more money than if they'd taken that money ahead of time. They probably would have saved themselves a lot of aggravation and frustration. But that's the position of a CEO, people in C-suite. They have a bigger risk appetite than what a lot of us security professionals think that they should have. But that's what ends up happening in those situations.
So before we let you go, James, we have a lot of CISOs. I mean, that's a very big part of our audience. So if maybe you could just narrow the message right now to Fortune 500, Global 2000, these large enterprise CISOs. You're on the cutting edge. You live this, you breathe this. The CISOs are dealing with so many different things, as you know. They have platform decisions to make, and they're dealing with everything from endpoint security to the cloud. How important is security awareness training in the grand scheme of things? What can you leave those CISOs with?
When you look at your organization and you're looking at protecting it, and technology is going to be one part of it. But when we see that a majority of the cyber attacks and breaches that are happening because of the human, and we're having that human error, the quote from Gartner you mentioned earlier, it's important that your people are a part of that security program as well. A lot of the time, IT folks, CISOs, we've unfortunately joked about it, but we say, humans are the weakest link, but they're the biggest attack vector, and they continue to be because the attacks are successful because of getting in through social engineering. And so when we look at the budget and we see how much is being spent, a lot of that ends up going to the networking, the platforms, how much is actually being spent on the human compared to how much, how vulnerable we are. We see all the attacks coming in. The human aspect is a lot more riskier. And, if somebody gets in, we're looking at 160 days plus before, on average, of an organization realizing that they've been breached. So if we can shift some of that focus and some of that funding towards the human aspect and get them educated, that's kind of one of the easy wins. Getting some awareness, reducing that risk, especially of the phishing attacks. The phish prone percentage, if we can reduce that, that's going to help in the long run as well. And having that education with the employees and getting their buy-in and acceptance, growing that security culture is going to make your life a lot easier, because in the sense of they are handling the front door, they've that proverbial electronic front door. They're guarding that and protecting that for you, and then allows you to make your focus elsewhere because you're not having to worry about a breach because of somebody clicking on a link.
James, is always a wealth of information. I always enjoy the conversation, and I hope you'll be back on with us soon. Let's not wait 2 years this time.
Definitely. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, James. I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. Joining us today was James McQuiggan, security awareness advocate for KnowBe4, the world's first and largest new school security awareness training and simulated phishing platform that helps you manage the ongoing problem of social engineering. To learn more about our sponsor, visit KnowBe4.com. You can keep up with all of our media at cybercrimemagazine.com.